Phil Harris and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible fortnightly podcast, Dream Big, Move Fast.
A progressive, contemporary conversation on what it takes to be a dynamic thinker, leader, and role model.
Backed with over 2 decades of friendship, trials and tribulations that teach from real-world experience and what it takes to dream big, move fast. If you want the staff to give great service to customers, the leaders have to give great service to the staff. Ari Weinzweig. Phil, what are your thoughts about this?
In its simplest form, I'd say that's been our entire strategy at Harris, which is how do we provide a platform that serves our customer, which is our internal employees. How can we provide a platform that inspires them so they can go out there into the marketplace and do great things? I haven't got control over what property managers and salespeople say to people in that live moment in the marketplace. I'm not there for that. The only thing I can do is hopefully have an environment that enables them to provide great service when we're not there.
Does that name ring a bell when you see Ari?
No.
So he's actually got one of the most incredible sandwich shops in the US, and he's actually then gone and built an incredible customer service training business on the side.
What's the sandwich shop?
That's a great question.
Okay.
But he wrote the book Bottom Line Change.
Okay, gotcha.
And the interesting conversation is that literally, dissatisfaction times by vision times by first steps, that's all come from Ari because he was a phenomenal operator on that. And it gives us a great conversation because I have a belief that, great service transcends all marketplaces. So all market conditions, great service always wins. Good market, bad market, different market, you've just got to make sure that you actually get very clear. Now, Phil, I know that you're taking your little ones off to the beach, and when you do that, you probably make some decisions about whether or not they're going swimming or not based on the size of the waves, whether or not it's high tide, low tide, whether or not the temperature of the water, and if they're sharks. And I'm not sure you're not putting Noah in the water if they're sharks, although it depends on the day. But the basic foundational idea is that literally, isn't it amazing that you will look at the weather app on your phone and make a decision? Do I need a jumper? Am I wearing shorts and a t-shirt? Am I taking a jacket? But yet, and so you will adapt to that. Yet, if you go to look at a typical residential real estate business, very rarely do they go, so guys, what are the conditions? And then how do we adapt? And so today, that's what the conversation's about. It's about really managing for markets.
Yes.
And so literally, one of the favorites was, and it's been around for a little while, and Hare and Todd White are probably the ones that publish it the most, but they didn't necessarily come up with the concept, which was what we got to call the property clock. And so the property clock starts at the top of the property cycle. It's the boom, everything's amazing. And then all of a sudden goes into a declining market. And what do you know happens in a declining market? Seller expectations are way above where buyers are. Buyers don't turn up to open for inspections all of a sudden. By the time the seller comes down to what the buyer wants to pay, the buyer's already dropped again. So there's a real restriction. It's usually signified by increases in interest rates, so lack of serviceability. There's a conversation around what's going on in the economy. There's employment issues, all of those sorts of things. And then you get to a declining market into the bottom of market cycle, and normally what happens here is that there's a flood of properties available on market. There's 10 billion listings available. Open for inspection numbers don't really exist. You have to move 100% to a lot of private buyer appointments to try to get buyers through a property. Just getting an offer is a good start. You got to really work hard in that negotiation phase. Long days on market is a symptom of what's actually happening in marketplaces. There's a lot of domino sales. So literally if I can get this seller to buy that, then I've just got to sell theirs to make that sale happen.
Yes.
So there's a lot of conditional stuff. Auction clearance rates are sub 50%. You can definitely see the market's a lot sicker. You work 10 times harder for the same income you earned last year. Then we've got a rising market. All of a sudden you lose a listing to a competitor, they overprice it, but they actually sell it. And you're like, what happened there? And then all of a sudden you turn up at an open and you check your watch because there's 10 buyers out the front and you think you're late, but they're just there early. And you don't realise that there's been a change in interest rates downwards, that there's been a government incentive like only 5% deposits, for example, that's all of a sudden come into play. And you don't realise that all of a sudden there's a shift in sentiment occurring, and it happens very, very quickly. And all of a sudden days on market improve, properties start to sell, there's a real shortage of listings, there's a whole heap of buyer inquiry. You send a property live on one of the real estate portals, there's 40 inquiries that come in overnight, you don't know what to do with it. And then you've got a rising market at the top of market cycle. Real estate agents are stressed. I just don't know how to deal with all of this money I'm making. There's too much volume. I think I'm going to put on another team member. I think I'm going to start my own brand, like literally. And normally the graphic designers tell me that when we're at the top of the market because they've got record inquiries of people wanting to open their own logo. And so it's an interesting thing about understanding that property market cycle. And, if you go and have a look at it, and, you and I have got some great friends over in Western Australia that have got a phenomenal business there right now. And they were telling us that, there was 23,000 properties, for example, are available for sale during the declining markets over there. And right now, there's only 3,800 properties for sale and there's 800 selling a week. So like Perth has been on fire, since not like literally, but since 2020 in terms of the volume of transactions. And so literally your ability to prospect, generate a lead and get a listing is the skill set. Whereas we've got other markets, for example, like say, for example, Torquay or Bells Beach down in Victoria, where the majority of those listings have been on the market for more than 90. And there's a lot of listings that have been on the market for over 180 days. Now, as a real estate coach, before I walk into a client, one of the things that I look at is I go on and I do some research about what's happening in that market, because it will determine the strategy that I'm going to run in my playbook and what is the core emphasis of what I'm going to need to do in my training outside of, more cyclical conversations, like it's Christmas and you need to list for January, so to get people very focused on that. Does it surprise you that literally that business principals or sales managers or salespeople don't necessarily really think about what stage they're at in a market cycle and what are the specific skills they're going to need to become exceptional at to win in that market?
Yeah, potentially surprising, potentially not. I think whatever the saying is, if you're in the picture, it's hard to see the frame. If you're in the frame, it's hard to see the picture. Whatever it is, like when you're in it, it's sometimes you don't necessarily notice the subtleties of a market shifting, if that makes sense. But I think having that awareness, I think it comes down to two things, Josh. One is actually maybe having the discipline or the awareness to actually really understand and navigate the market that you're in. And normally, it's not necessarily, you don't necessarily always notice or it's hard to notice the shift or the swing. So, for example, my children, when I see them grow, I don't see how big they're getting, how quickly. But if you come down to my house, Josh, you haven't seen the kids for 3 months or 6 months, you're like, far out, Noah's gotten big. I don't notice that because I'm in it every single day, seeing that small change. So I think you've got to have that awareness. And then I think, you said it best before, which is just have the playbook, which has got those strategies. Because really, if you've got the straight, it's not that big a deal. Like when the pendulum is swinging more towards a bullish vendor market where there's lots of buyers, well, clearly it's all about just get listings because we know the property's going to be sold. When it's going the other way where stock volumes are higher and it's hard to get property sold, you've got to be focused on vendor management and working buyers. So it's just pivoting to what's appropriate in your business at that moment. The whole danger zone is probably not the market. The danger zone is not transitioning from where you were to where you need to be.
And I'd say the other thing is not knowing when you're getting lucky.
Yeah.
Because there's a big difference between...
Well, we all got lucky for 2 years over COVID, right?
Some. And this is that whole idea, right? So I tend to think about 5 key things when I look at a market. So the first kind of thing I look at is, okay, number one, what's actually happening to borrowing capacity? Is it going up? Is it going down? That's often linked to interest rates. Secondary conversation, what's actually happening to serviceability costs? So how much does it actually cost me to borrow $1 million 3 years ago versus today? So that's currently decreasing because of the change in interest rates. The next conversation is that borrowing capacity is soon going to be impacted because if property prices go up, it doesn't matter how much money you could borrow, the property prices are up, so there's still the same number of buyers. And so any short-term game of borrowing capacity is soon lost when the market starts to drive. The next conversation I have a look at what's happening in terms of supply. So if I go and search on the major real estate portals, how many properties are actually available in that price range? If there's one, it's probably going to get a great price. If there's literally 500, it's probably not going to get a great price. So you got to start thinking about that. And then what's actually happening in terms of demand. Now, in different states and territories, because of different quoting legislation, there will be different measurements. Some states will look purely at inquiry. Other states will look at, well, do I actually have someone coming to the first open home? That's the only way that they know that the demand is going to be there. It's later on evidenced in people that are either registering to bid, if that's a requirement, or people that are actually turning up and bidding at an auction, which is then evidenced by what we go to call clearance rates with auctions that are reported. So that gives you a bit of an idea about what's happening on the demand side. And then the final one is that then what's the mood? So what's the market? What's the media saying about where the market's at? So they're publishing stories about FOMO, the fear of missing out. Are they publishing stories about fungi, the fear of not getting in? Are they publishing stories about literally fungo, the fear of not getting out? So literally that whole conversation, there's always that guy in the supermarket with the trolley going, oh, I should have sold my property 3 months ago and I'm about to lose $60,000.
Yes.
That's bottom of market cycle. Top of market cycle, people in Sydney made $1,000 a day by owning a house. Property price growth has outpaced their earning potential at work. So you can kind of spot it early if you know what to look for.
Yes. And then on top of that, Josh, I'd also say that there are also, what would I call them? There are global real estate principles that apply to any market, meaning that if you know property prices and you have sensible, sophisticated conversations with people at the point of listing the property, if you have a clear process for launching the property, if you have a clear process for running the campaign, and you've got a structured approach to vendor negotiation and vendor education, Yes, there will be some pivoting and there's some diversification in how those strategies are rolled out, but those kind of global laws of real estate will hold you in good stead across any marketplace.
So the rule of 72 is another great principle. Basically, you take the number 72 and you divide it by an annual growth rate. So during COVID, we saw some property prices go up 40% in under 12 months. Interesting conversation, 72 divided by 40. That would mean that property prices are set to double every 1.5 years. Unsustainable. Dubai right now, 20%. 72 divided by 20, every 3 years, property prices are doubling. Unsustainable. Right? So it's the rate of growth that I'm worried about. So it can't continue to grow. And what that means is that there's a lot of people that come in to sell because of pure speculation that I'm making cash, right? Yeah. When that slows down, then you've got to get good, which is what's happened to a lot of holiday markets around Australia that really boomed during COVID, but now have come back. So a good annualized growth rate for me is about circa 6%, is very healthy.
Yes.
So 72 divided by 6, about every 12 years, property prices double.
Yeah.
If you have a look at Adelaide, I think that there were years that like it was 0.5 and 1 and 1.5 and maybe 2% annualized growth rate.
Well, pre-COVID, we averaged about 1.8, 1.9 per year.
And so then all of a sudden, when you start saying now, well, Adelaide's done very well compared to the rest of Australia and we're circa at 7%, I'm like, man, do you remember your videos from 6 years ago? Like that's what I think in the back of my head, because this is amazing. And South Australia has really benefited a lot from some poor property taxation policy, as a personal opinion, about what's actually happening in Victoria. And so literally there's a lot of affordability and there's a lot of great things happening in the state. So I actually go to SQM Research, Louis Christopher. I search total property listings. It's free property data. I type in any postcode in Australia and it gives me a graph of what's happened over the last 10 years and more precisely over the last 12 months of total property listings available on site and how many are on certain days on market. And so if there's a lot on over 180 days, I know I've got to do price reductions, buy work, expireds and withdrawals or opportunities for prospecting. If I'm in a very healthy market like mine in Sydney, like literally there's not much opportunities on expireds and withdrawals and most properties actually probably sell in under 28 days. So you got to know your market conditions and then you've got to know what to do next. Real estate's a pretty simple game, Phil. I'm going to say that you're either chasing buyers, you're chasing sellers, or you're chasing both. What are your thoughts about that? That's one of three.
I really love that analogy of just keeping it really simple. You can get really caught up in property clocks and inflation, economy, supply, demand, housing affordability, income to debt ratios. But at the end of the day, are you chasing buyers, you're chasing sellers, or both? And then you're slightly pivoting your strategy, only slightly. As I said, the overarching global real estate principles remain the same, but you've just got a slightly heavier weighting in one, either or both.
So Phil, I'm going to put you in. This is a special bonus round. I'm going to put you on a little bit of pressure here.
Oh, yeah.
So here's the situation. So let's go to St Kilda in Melbourne. There's 20 apartments in this particular building.
Yes.
This particular building, they're all kind of single level stuff. So there's 20 in a row, 1960 style. Interesting conversation is that literally there's a problem. The owner needs to sell.
Yes.
So the owner needs to sell this particular property. They've been on the position that's been on the market for 5 weeks. Now,
yes.
There's a few issues. The first issue is that there is a $25,000 special levy, which is due to be paid by whoever owns the property in 10 weeks' time. That is the last special levy for the major upgraded building works that have been going on. The property is currently covered by scaffolding because they're replacing all of the old timber windows. And also in addition to that, they're also replacing the entire roof on the property to bring it up to modern standards, new tiles, whatever. The agent is reporting that there's a problem because most of the buyers who come to see the property, as they drive to approach to park, they see all the scaffolding and they just continue to drive on. And any buyer that's come through can't get past the idea that there's a $25,000 special levy that needs to be paid in effectively 10 weeks' time. What does the agent do? What are some options?
Well, firstly, I want to kind of disclaimer. I can't help but feel you're setting me up for failure here. It's a trick question of some sort, but yeah. I'll have a go at it.
Play the game.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, I'd be looking at trying to flip the works and so forth that are being done to the property. I'll be trying to turn that into a positive, which is where you're actually going to be coming into you can't call it a new building, but you're going to be coming into a newly
fully refurbed. Yeah.
Fully refurbed. So in terms of the marketing, I'll be trying to moderate expectations before people get there. So if people
artist impression.
Yeah, exactly right. So if people are turning up to the property and the initial kind of shock and awe of seeing scaffolding, of having no awareness, then I think that needs to be overcome. And then if you can overcome that, $25,000 is irrelevant. It's a value for return proposition there. Mm-hmm. So if you're spending $25,000 but we're seeing the value in it, you're getting completely refurb, all those sort of things, that's not the issue. So my perception, my opinion, I'll be doing whatever I can do to modify the expectation before anybody steps foot on site on that property.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
No. Over to you.
Okay, so some of the things that people came up with when I put the scenario in a seminar, let's get a price reduction of $25,000. Let's get a prepayment of the $25,000.
Yeah.
Right. Like literally, there's some of the things.
Credit. Yeah.
Yeah. Like literally,
rebates.
let's put it to auction. Let's do something. Right.
Yeah.
This is what we actually did. I said to the agent, what I want you to do, because like this open marketing thing, it's not working. I want you to ring the other 19 owners. What? I said, I want you to get on the phone and ring the other 19 owners because they already know what the building looks like.
They're already sold.
They already know what's going on.
Yeah.
And they already know what it's going to look like and into the future. Ring them. So we ring the owner next door. And this is unbelievable. Ring the owner next door. He's an out-of-area owner. Lives in Hobart. Guess what? Has not seen that another property in the unit complex has come on the market. Is not looking on any real estate portal to buy another investment property per se, and is certainly not looking in the area where he owns one. So we ring up the guy and said, oh, hey man, I just want to let you know, I know that you've got unit number 2. We've just listed unit number 1 in the building. Would you like to buy it? He goes, man, I've always wanted to own another one in the building for sure, and pays the full asking price that afternoon. So what I've got to say is to you, just be really clear that you don't get convinced about a set of circumstances that you have created in your own story, and you're not using creativity to see an opportunity of how you could go to maximize
I think that's
sales.
the art of sales. It's we all have to be very careful, Josh. We all have this predisposition towards selling property the way it's always been done, which is I have to market it this way. It must have a price guide. It must, or I've got to get a price reduction. Oh, it's not working. There's no buyers, as opposed to kind of thinking lateral and getting creative. So great story. I don't know if it's true or not, Josh, but it's a good story.
Did you remember that story about my dad? My dad said to me, he goes, I'm really good at selling ugly property. So like, this is a true story. So we're in the car one day, we're heading out to this place down near Chiltern, Rutherglen. And as we're going, we turn up at the service station, and there's a bloke behind us, and he says, oh, Brian, what are you doing? And Dad said, I'll go down this auction. He goes, oh, mate, I'll follow you down. So we get down to this property, and mate, it's a classic. One side's the highway, one side's the train station, the other side's the local cemetery. So it's a killer location, right? So naturally, you drive in there, and the person who had owned the property that was in there prior had 14 greyhounds living in the house. So you can imagine the windows have got lots of leaks all over them, right? Anyway, the guy comes in and he says to Dad, he goes, geez, man, this place is noisy with the highway. And my dad turns to him and says, man, you can't even hear it when the train comes past. And actually, that buyer ended up buying at the auction, and we bought and sold the property because of some random guy at a service station. But what I'm trying to get you to think about, creativity really does win in business, and learning how to help people to see the opportunity. Principle, know the conditions so then you can surf the waves. Phil, that's a nice little summary, really, of what we've spoken about today. What do you think about that as a core principle? Yeah,
it absolutely is. So not only for the marketplace, but also for the business owners that are tuning in. What are those market conditions? Like when you really sit down to have a successful real estate business, the market conditions. You know what salespeople want from you inside your business. So are you providing that? You know what property managers need to actually be able to thrive. Are you providing that? Focus on the things that you can control. Market dynamics, market conditions, they'll come and go, but what can you control?
Feeling good and ready for more? Thanks for joining us
On Dream Big,
Move Fast.